All right, I'm going to start letting folks in and just greeting everybody as they come through. Drea, can you hear me? We'll see.
I'm also like eating a muffin on the side, so.
I love it. Hi, everyone. Hi, as you're all joining. Hello, hello.
Welcome.
Let us know in the chat where you're calling in from.
Hi, I'm from Chile.
Hi.
Welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you all.
Ontario, hello, hello. Awesome. Thanks for being here, everyone. All righty. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us for our Changemakers in Reuse panel hosted by Remake. So excited to be with our lovely panelists today and be with all of you. If you are new to Remake, we are a nonprofit that is focused on fashion activism. We have a global community of people who love fashion. Just like all of our panelists here, we're really passionate about fashion, but we think that the fashion industry can do better and can be a force for good. And so we're fighting for the industry to change its ways. And over the summer, Remake hosts a No New Clothes campaign. So basically, we ask people to commit to 90 days of no new clothes. Now, it's a summer campaign, but you can really, of course, take a no new clothes pledge anytime you'd like. Basically, it's just making a commitment to yourself that you are going to not buy new for 90 days. Prioritize the things that you already have, prioritize reuse, and that's really what we're here to talk about today. So I hope that if you haven't yet, you might consider joining the No New Clothes campaign and making that pledge with yourself.
Followed by pound.
And we'll be putting the pledge for that in the chat in just a second. And I'm just gonna have everyone
Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise, just press pound to continue.
Someone who just joined is muted. I'm gonna try and figure out who that is.
Yeah, we're just going to mute everybody.
You are in the meeting now. There are more than 20 participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded.
All right. So yeah, we hope that everyone will consider joining our No New Clothes pledge, making that commitment for yourself. And we're going to have a great conversation today about reuse and why we prioritize nothing new. To get us started, I'm going to kick it over to our panelists and have them tell us a little bit about them. All right, Danny, I'll have you go first.
Hi, everyone. I am Danny. Can everyone hear me okay? Is there an echo coming from me or anything? We're good? Okay. I'm the founder of a brand called Picnic Wear. We're a cottage industry clothing and accessories brand that makes all our wares from vintage and dead stock materials, most notably vintage beach and bath towels. We use the phrase future vintage over future garbage, which I'm sure will come up again because it's like kind of the ethos of my brand. I started Picnic Wear in 2019 really, but didn't really get it going until when the pandemic hit. But prior to that, I had been working as a sweater designer for corporate fast fashion brands for about 10 years. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Drea, how about you?
Can y'all hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah? Okay, awesome. My name is Drea. Let's see. I am originally from Southern California. What I do now is I'm the owner, several hats. I'm the owner, head seamstress, and production manager at Hidden Opulence. Hidden Opulence is based in Portland, Oregon, and we are a sustainably focused alterations and small batch production studio here. And what we do pretty much, we serve both existing designers and, sorry, we serve existing designers as well as everyday folks, encouraging them to come through, and we can figure out some ways to either just alter your clothes so you can wear them every day, or upcycle your items so you can wear them more, or love them more, or keep them longer. And then with designers, we do small batch production, so just based on the amounts that they need, we can produce lower quantities just to make sure that we're not creating tons of waste. So that's a little bit about what I do.
Love it. All right. Natasha, who's joining us very early in the morning. I think we have most of the US time zones represented on this call today, but Natasha wins for the earliest.
I know we're always so hi everyone, I'm Natasha. I'm was based in New York but now live back home where I grew up in Hawaii. I am the founder of the Consistency Project. We started as a vintage shop and focused on kind of breaking the stigma of secondhand and kind of bringing the conversation to the forefront before even being a shop. But since the pandemic happened, it was harder to source secondhand and harder to kind of continue operating the business as like normal. So, we turned to the scraps that we had collected. We sell a lot of pants. We cropped a lot of pants in our days as a shop. And we took those cropped trims and remnants and ended up making a patchwork design pant, which has kind of kicked off what we also do now in addition to vintage is create kind of rework collections from different scraps, remnants, and secondhand. So yeah, super excited to be here amongst such an amazing group of people. So thank you.
Thank you all. And if I haven't gotten the chance to meet you yet in the audience, my name's Emily. I'm Remake's advocacy manager, and I help run our various campaigns. And I'm also the host of Pre-Love Podcast, which is all about vintage and secondhand. And that's how I met this lovely crew here. So excited to talk with you about No New Clothes. All of you have taken part in our No New Clothes pledge. Some not just for this summer, but for much longer have been committed to No New Clothes. So I just love to hear from the group why you're passionate about No New Clothes and why this is something that you wanted to get involved with.
Do you have a particular order on how we want to jump in?
Go for it.
No? Oh, what? Yeah, I mean, well, when I started the Consistency Project, it was like a side thing. That's why it has the name Project in it. And really, it was like my commitment to No New Clothes. It was like kind of my way to challenge not only myself, but those around me. And then ideally those that kind of interacted with the Consistency Project to like rethink how they consume clothing, but also just their relationship with clothing in general, and to view secondhand as an option that is more sought out than I think maybe new, or like you're that the saying secondhand first, right? You're just like, you just want to think about it first. That's like you're just dying to get it secondhand because it's like that much more special, and really creating that kind of mindset. And I think that has been why I started the Consistency Project. Therefore, really, I knew if I was going to continue it, the foundation and the baseline was always going to be new clothes, and it was always going to be secondhand. And I committed to myself, as much as sometimes, you know, those in the fashion industry will understand that sometimes it's so much easier to go the path, not that it's easy already to be a designer, to be in fashion. It's already hard to be in fashion to begin with, but then to go against like everything that the industry, you know, operates out of, and to just choose secondhand or to do things in a different way, to produce clothing and reuse all of the scraps maybe that you're using in production, it's um it's hard. And so, you know, I think that commitment and thought process, it was something that I also felt like needed to be, you know, kind of brought to the forefront, and there needed to be a lot of transparency. And I think that's where like my fellow panelists, I think, you know, are equally inspiring in how they take things and showcase to people that um, fashion can be seen in a very different way, and that, you know, it is, and that I think the transparency of that, it's really, really hard what we do. It's like not easy. You're definitely not going to be like a millionaire doing this. So, you know, like you do it truly out of like the love of your heart and trying to do something different and good. And I think, you know, that's kind of the main thing that I've been thinking about when I think about No New Clothes, or like the campaign itself, I guess.
Yeah. Danny, do you have anything to add coming from the former fast fashion world?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was wanting to speak about. So I've always loved vintage and bought secondhand, but I also bought new things as well in the past. And yeah, definitely being on the like design side of some of these brands just showed me how irresponsible the industry is. And you know, every season peddling new trends and just producing so much, and every year trying to figure out how to sell the best seller from last year, but like in a way trick the consumer into thinking it's a new thing that they need now. And so many like just quick decisions based on really silly things, just canceling an order because you saw something else on a runway where your customer's not even looking at the runway and doesn't care about that. And so all those things that have already been in production are now garbage, essentially. And one of my favorite things that I did while I worked in my last job as a sweater designer was actually my boss, they had a lot of yarn left over from styles that had been canceled. So all these yarns that hadn't been used. And the most fun I had at that job was trying to figure out what to do with those yarns, how to mix them together, how to like marl them, and basically like recycle what we had already purchased. And, you know, it was a way of us they were called like liability yarns. And, you know, I already kind of knew that I wanted to go in this direction and get out of that world, but it kind of was like a moment where I was like, it's so much more fun. And like Natasha said, freaking challenging to figure out what to do with things that otherwise would be discarded. It's way harder. It's so much easier to take a roll of fabric and stack it up and just cut a bunch of pattern pieces out. It's so much harder to, you know, you have this weird shaped piece and be like, what can I do with this? This is why it's slow fashion, because it takes a long time to figure out. So yeah, there's just so many existing things in this world already. So much beautiful fabric, you know, beautiful towels, beautiful things that can be made into clothing. There's no need to produce more. Basically, we probably have an endless supply of fabric or existing clothing for I don't know how long, but we are good to dress the world for a long time.
Got time. And Drea, you kind of come from the perspective of helping people understand like keeping and loving their clothes longer. So maybe you can talk about like that element of it too.
Yeah, so I feel, I mean, in terms of the challenge, I hope that it brought to light a little more about what you already, or what folks already have in their closets. As the seasons change, you know, maybe there's something that you totally loved in winter and it's not necessarily the thing that you want to wear in summer, but hidden opulence is definitely the place you can bring something like that and you can rework it in a way that you can have it for summertime. But I really enjoyed the challenge, mostly the way that it was worded. I feel like with the air of sustainability and everything that comes with that, some of those things aren't, it feels so, can feel sometimes so just like black and white in terms of, oh, you have to do this, or if you're not doing this exactly this way, like, it, you know, it's meant to like kind of make you feel bad. And I think that's absolutely not the way that we should be going about this. And I love that I love the way the challenge is worded, just because it's more inviting. It's us coming together, trying to meet you where you are, you know, do what's best in your means that you can control. This is about sustainability. It's not about, okay, no new nothing starting tomorrow, that kind of thing. And I think for me, I'm like, now I'm going to go outside of like what I do, but it challenged me to purchase items that weren't necessarily clothing in a different way. I was looking for electronics, and you know, went to Best Buy, and they do have a second. So many places, if you're starting to look harder, or with this lens of no new, there's actually solutions that are starting to pop up everywhere. So in terms of that, I think that that's also a great way. It's like to extend outside of the way that you purchase clothing and things like that. Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to add that, though.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you said that about the pledge. Like, that's how we really like to think about it, is that what we're trying to help people get to is like a sustainable mindset shift. And that can mean a lot of different things for people, but we want it to last. And so we want it to be something that like changes your everyday practices, the way you look at the world, things like that. It's about that more than it is about like a hard cut, not chopping, you know, thing. So thank you for adding that. So I'd love to hear from the panelists about prioritizing nothing new and reuse in your businesses. And maybe we could just kind of go round robin about like you deciding to make that decision and what that's meant and look like for you.
I can go again. I guess the commitment started really again when I started TCP, but like it started from like myself. So as Drea said, you know, like it's sometimes you're like looking at, okay, the decisions that you make for yourself and what you're doing in your life. And it's so much easier as a business owner to trans that genuinely and like authentically into your business. And so really, you know, looking at everything you do from just how you operate your life on the day to day, what you buy to just like live, those type of decisions, and really translating it into the business by, okay, you know, if we need supplies or what we're getting for certain things, and really leveraging that kind of, again, mindset of like, how do I make sure that I'm getting everything that I know is like the right, you know, the best decision, maybe not right, but best decision, I think, for the business situation. I mean, you have a lot of different things you have to consider, like budget when you're running a business. And I think, you know, from starting as a vintage shop, I think that's where having a bunch of secondhand things to work with and really turning to like what you already have, I think that was like really the cool part. I think even for Danny's story too, it's like we like, okay, we're looking at like what can we do with like what we have. And within the situation of like, for me it was like, okay, pandemic, we don't can't really go out and get certain things with something in mind, so let's just turn to what we have. And I think that is such a key thing to think about if you are joining and you're like trying to start your own business, or if you are just trying to integrate, right, this campaign and lifestyle and mindset on the everyday, just like looking and seeing, okay, like what do I have and what can I do? And that kind of mindset and challenge to like problem solve, it's truly kind of what we as like kind of business owners and creatives do on the day to day. It's like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, a lot of it's just problem solving with, you know,
Yep.
what you have and what you can do. And I think that's just something that I don't know, has really been a key thing as far as like how I run my business in relation to
Do
the
you
camp.
all do you all kind of view that as like an opportunity to get creative, like that problem solving?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Dre, if you were gonna say something.
I mean, Danny, when you were saying about, oh, I have this odd shape, like what could I make out of? I completely failed to mention that Hidden Opulence also creates like upcycled products that you can use in your home. So we do like reusable sponges and makeup removers and things. And that all stems from the idea of like, okay, I have this little piece that we cut off from someone's alteration or, you know, remnant from doing a small batch order. And I'm just like, oh, and what can we do with that? We can do something with that, absolutely. And even yesterday, I'm putting together a wholesale order, and I'm thinking, oh, I really like this material, but it's cut up already in squares. So I just started sewing it all back together so that I could cut out the proper piece. But that's the creativity part, right? That's when you're like so inspired by a piece, a material, and maybe it's, you know, this big. And then you think, oh, I know, you know, we have tons of scraps hanging around. How can we combine those together and turn it into something that's even more interesting that like what we started with, or highlight that little, you know, that little sliver of like, I don't know, strawberry or something that was on the material. But I think that challenge is equally as exciting because it's a new puzzle. I'm like, puzzles forever.
I totally agree. I have the same sort of approach with what I make too, because, you know, when I started, I was just doing hats and then started doing shorts. And then as I was, you know, collecting all those remnants, I realized like I had these big pieces, but they weren't big enough for any of my hat pattern pieces. They weren't big enough for my shorts, that's for sure. So I had to, you know, think outside of the box of what do I do with these? And then I came up with the idea of doing like applique sweatshirts. So I, you know, sourced vintage sweatshirts. I lived at the time by a thrift store that just had like racks and racks of vintage sweatshirts that were like, you know, different like colleges or whatever. And I realized that I could just like create these appliques that I put on top of them. So it was like I started my business with one garment in mind. And then just from that, I was inspired to like create this whole other thing that I wouldn't have come up with if it weren't for the fact that I was like challenging myself to use all the remnants. So, and then from that, I realized kind of exactly what Drea's doing, that I could make little reusable makeup pads from the remnants that were too small for that. So no one should ever buy cotton makeup pads because there's so much fabric that you can just make reusable ones out of.
Yeah,
Totally.
that's amazing. Natasha, do you have any other, like, do you have anything to add for that creativity piece, like wacky, wild things that you've made?
Well, yeah, I mean, everything takes a lot more time, of course, right? And so that's like something to know. It's like we're like, oh yeah, you do this, and like Drea, like piecing all the pieces together, like a lot of that is like a lot of work. And so like really just recognizing that it's you're not choosing it because you're like, yeah, I'm just trying to like, you know, like this is the easiest way to do things. It's actually the hardest way.
Yeah.
And so that's what is like kind of special and slow and creative about it. But I think like one example of just, I guess, something that I find like really special and really showcases the creativity side, but we were making our pants and we were, you know, we had squares if we were sewing those back together. So that's what we do with our checkered pants. And you have to create kind of the re-roll and like the fabric that you're going to use to cut out the shape of the pant and the leg. And so we create that. And then you have to, it's really hard to cut off your own work because you're like, oh my gosh, I just sewed like all these seams and you're like cutting this shape out. And then you have these like slivers of like your work and that you're like, whoa, no, like it's just like time. And it was so
I
special.
took time to sew that small segment.
It was, yes, like even just that segment, you're like, oh God, I just cut off like, you know, an hour of time. Like
Right.
what am I doing? How do I do this better? But essentially for us, we like took those slivers and I have a daughter, Nellie, and she is almost 2. And so we're like, well, we've always wanted to do like a little mini line and a baby line. So like, what if we just took all of those slivers and combine them together to create a smaller piece of reroll to then create our little pant. So that's kind of how our mini line started. And if you see some of the pants where it's like the rectangles are really skinny or like things are really like smaller and weird and all like jagged and crazy, like it's because that's like the cutoffs of the adult pants that we were making. And so I think it's funny because when people now see the mini pants, they're like, oh, I want those ones. And it's like, oh yeah, like you realize, wow, people actually like the one that was made out of all the remnants of what you were trying to make for them. So it's just kind of like a funny thing, and it really showcases, you know, sometimes you will pleasantly be surprised by what you can do, and you will never know unless you just like take a bird's eye view and like reflect on like what you have. And it might stem to create something completely different, completely new for you, and just change everything like as far as what you're doing creatively. So and this can apply to any, I think, creative process. There's always kind of this like extra thing that is kind of created. So yeah, that's
Nellie is the most adorable, stylish, no new clothes advocate, the tiniest no new clothes advocate.
she has no choice at this point.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the slow part of it, because obviously like we've talked about, like a lot of this you know, takes more time, but is also in line with what we're trying to promote of like consuming more slowly and thoughtfully. So I'd love to give you the opportunity to talk about you know, how you promote or educate about slow living, slowing down in your business.
I think for me, that's honestly been my biggest challenge, probably because I came like directly from the fast fashion world. And so I feel like ingrained in me is this like feeling of always thinking that I need to create something new, because for 10 years, I was like weekly being asked to design new items. What's the new iteration? What's the new trend? What's the new this? So, and then also, of course, being on Instagram, like it's you're seeing new stuff all the time. And so I put my own pressure on myself to be like, oh, well, what's going to be my next thing? What's going to be my next thing? And I'm constantly having to have conversations with myself to remind myself, like, I can continue to do the hats. I can continue to do the shorts. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I do not need to create something new right now. And yes, of course I do, because it's like, I am a designer. I want to do new fun things and come up with new ways to use the materials I have. But it's definitely something that I have to like talk myself out of. And yeah, that's been a big challenge for me, for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like I relate to that energy from the fast fashion world, Jenny, because I did work in that sector for a minute until I slowly came to and lived, or like moved to Portland and had the opportunity to now work with designers. So that I feel like I experienced that energy coming from the people that I work with as well, feeling like they have to come up with something new, or they have to, and I'm always like, no, like no need, like just hone in on that one thing that you really enjoy doing, and don't feel like you have to have, you know, competing with fast fashion, that's insane, you know, the seasons are insane, like the amount of pieces that some, you know fully, oh, hi. And so, yeah, I feel like when I'm working with designers, I definitely, take that anxiety from them and just say, no, let's just work at whatever pace. What is it that you really want? And then also, we want to put so much care and time and intention into these pieces that are being created, because you definitely want to see that piece around, as long as possible. Even if the initial buyer of your garment, passes it on, it's like, wouldn't it be so amazing that years and years down the line you see your piece being worn by somebody at a wedding or at some sort of special event? It becomes like cared and loved for. So it's like quieting that like fast fashion. And no, Instagram is absolutely a very difficult force, as the day and age and technology that we're in. It's like we consume like what we're seeing, and we want more and more and more. But it's like you have to remember that that's not everything, to have like the newest thing. It's like new to you thing is actually like far more important, and that can mean, that opens up the gates of like what new is.
Yeah, and I think conversations like this are a good start too, because I think like I know that if I did create something, a brand new garment tomorrow, like one that I hadn't done before, I would get like so much more engagement because my viewers would be seeing something new from me. So that's like a weird temptation. But that's why it's like I said, important to have these conversations, because it's like, well, back to my ethos, the future vintage over future garbage.
Yes.
It's like I shouldn't be creating new trends all the time, because that's, those are going to be things that people are going to get tired of quickly. So if you get really good, like you were saying, like you hone in on your craft of what you're good at, then it's just going to get better and better. It's just going to become, like more special future vintage. So yeah, it's hard. It's like, I think all of us are kind of like, obviously I came from fast fashion as a designer, but all of us have also, become used to fast fashion as consumers too. So it's hard to stop and like acknowledge what that's kind of like, how that's affecting you. And like on Instagram, yeah, the algorithm is wanting to show you new stuff all the time. It's like another form of fast fashion. It's like, here's something new, here's something new. So
yeah.
And I guess from my perspective, I'm like, my background is like not fashion related at all. And so, but even with that, I feel the same exact pressure of like needing to create something new, or like, as like when you're just a business, just like putting things out that, again, like you guys said, it's like engaging and or feeling like relevant within a space that's just so busy constantly.
yeah.
And I'm like, and I don't even come from like a fashion background, and me as a shop and like, I guess, self-made designer, it's like I still feel that way. And so it's truly, that just speaks to kind of where the industry is, where society is, as far as how much we've really pushed this idea of like needing to constantly kind of entertain, catch the attention, bring something new to the table, or else you're just going to be forgotten and like replaced at that point. And so I absolutely even equally feel the same feelings. And I think, but to kind of show a different side, like I think that's where vintage, just existing things, are just already so special, to then like kind of look at, because it's like secondhand and vintage, like as it is, there's plenty of it and it's already there and it's made already. And so it's equally, something to like turn to, instead of maybe like as a shop or whatever, like trying to create something new, or as a consumer, you're like, okay, I want some, like, you know, maybe you do want something new for your closet because XYZ or whatever your personal reasoning could be. It's just like then turning to something just like vintage or secondhand that already exists. I think,
Definitely.
you know, it's equally a slow process though, if you're trying to find the size, the right material, you know, the price point. I mean, you know, if you're gonna go to a thrift store, you're like, all right, I need to like dedicate, you know, a couple hours to find, you know, a few great things, and it's still a very slow process. But I mean, anyone, I'm sure most of these people on the call, it's like everyone probably loves thrifting and can say like those couple hours are just, it's, you do it because of that experience and because of that journey of trying to search. And I think us as like kind of brands and shops, that's the same exact feeling we get when we're designing things with like secondhand. I feel like that, like, oh my gosh, like you don't know what's going to happen or what you can create. So I think that's, you know, the common thread is it's still slower
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
Definitely.
clicking and buying.
I'm going to start taking some questions from the audience. So folks, feel free to leave questions in the chat. But the first couple ones that are coming up are kind of about like running a business that's profitable. So folks talking about not feeling like they are enough, like they can generate enough to actually, you know, serve the public and have a business. And so I know you all probably have things to say about that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I see Francisco's question there about being, hi, I hope I said your name right, saying you work alone and how do you generate enough stock to to sell it and be profitable, and also not like totally wear yourself out, which you didn't say there, but I know is the truth because we've all been there. That was definitely like a huge, huge hurdle for me this past year. I was like, you know, very blessed to be able to sell most of the things I created, but still I wasn't able to produce fast enough to create enough to, you know, make enough money to pay the bills, to pay rent. So for me, I for my business, and everyone's business is different, I realized that like where I excelled the most was, I felt like in terms of like outwardly facing, I didn't want to pass on the like social media aspect, which is a huge part of my business, to someone else, because I think coming from my authentic voice, that was important. I also didn't want to pass on the design process, because to me, that's what I'm good at. That's what I excel at. That's my favorite thing to do. So at the end of the day, I realized that the thing that I could outsource to someone else was the sewing. I'm a good sewer. I'm not a bad sewer at all, but I'm definitely not a seamstress or a tailor. So my challenge was looking into, how do I find someone who will help me actually do the sewing, and who will understand my business in the like the, you know, minimal to zero waste process, someone who's not going to be expecting to just roll out a bolt of fabric and cut the pieces, because that's never going to be what I'm doing. You know, these small towels are like, I cut out all my pieces myself, because that is integral in the design process. So I was lucky enough to find a woman who has a business where she works with, at the time, because of COVID, it was like a lot of out of work tailors or costume designers who are used to doing one of a kind special pieces that are not exactly the same from one to the next. And, you know, their rates were high, which they should be, because these are very skilled people. But you know, luckily I had started out acknowledging how much time and work and goes into these items. So I have had to raise my pricing a little bit, but it wasn't like so drastic that it was so shocking to the consumer. So I was able to outsource the sewing to someone. Even though I'm in rural North Carolina now, I'm still sending my stuff to the Bronx to this woman and her team. And so that has been a lifesaver, because she's amazing. She is so similar to myself in that she is also, I told this anecdote before, like even when I went to her studio when I still lived in New York, and I saw, I was telling her about what I did. She was like, it would be helpful if each item came in its own bag. And then I was like, and she, before I even said anything, she's like, I know you don't want to buy a bunch of Ziploc bags. I've got this stash that just keeps regenerating over time. So she just like literally passed me a bag of Ziploc bags. And I was like, you get it. This is going to work. That was just the moment where I was like, this is going to work. She gets it. So that's worked out really well for me. And it did take a lot of time to be able to find someone like that. And it was through asking other people and networking that I was able to do that. So, but yeah, that's definitely a huge challenge for sure. I still don't know if I would say I'm necessarily like profitable, but but I've still got a young business, so I'm working towards it. Moving out of New York was a good start.
I think one thing I want to chime in, I think sometimes when you're starting, you're constantly thinking and comparing yourself to other brands that are doing something similar. And that can be like somewhat toxic sometimes and somewhat hindering to what's going to work for you. So that's like the first and foremost. It's like everyone's situation is different. And even from the outside, it's like TCP, it's just mainly me. I like Danny, I totally relate of like, oh, I'm not going to pass on things like social media, etc. Or like, it's just me. And I have, thank God I have one person, Nikki, who has been kind of my main support as well in New York. But we're a really small team in that sense. There's two, and then I sometimes contract some people to help, but it's really just two people. On the outside, I've had people be like, oh, what? You don't have someone running your social media, or you don't have like someone doing XYZ. And so on the outside, you think, oh, wow, like, you know, they must be making a ton of money by doing and having a bunch of help to make things happen. And realistically, most times that's not happening. And so like for your particular situation, just being like, okay, like what is going to work for me, or like, do I need to get kind of a side project or a second job? Because when I started TCP, I was doing a second job freelancing for like years. And so it wasn't like till I moved to New York that it was full time. And I only moved to New York a couple of years ago previously. So it wasn't like like there sometimes you have to pay the bills. Like you do have to sometimes take a second job, and you do have to do other things to really fund your own business, because unfortunately, it takes a lot of money to start. And I would say just like starting with like, if you can make the pieces that you make, start making those and start just trying to sell those. Because sometimes you'll think, oh, I need to produce like 20 units or 50 units or whatever to make money. And then you're sitting maybe with extra stock because you weren't understanding maybe what your market is. And in the very beginning of your business, you will absolutely not understand your market. As much as you think you do not, unfortunately. So take that time of like a slow, small numbers, and put things out, see how people respond. If you're designing things, you're going to get a lot of feedback, you're going to see what sells, and you want to just lean into those directions that's working for you. And I think, for a clothing line, for a children's clothing line particularly, that's like can be quite challenging if you're doing a lot of rework, because it's going to cost a lot more money. And as parents that, their kids are growing really fast, and I'm coming obviously from that perspective of like, I'm a parent, I understand the clothes, like Nelly spilling stuff all over, it's like, and you're like, do I want to spend, which we also sell very expensive kids pants too, so I also understand that toss up. But it's like, it's definitely a harder sell to really have parents invest clothing for their kids. And so what are you designing, and how is it going to be functional? How is it going to really kind of meet a need and last? And so those are just small direct kind of, I guess, helpful hints that hopefully will kind of steer you in the right direction. But I think, regardless. In the beginning, just really reflecting on, you know, what's going to be particularly great for you. Oh, and one quote, sorry, that I am just really inspired, and I wish I kind of thought about this in the beginning of like when I was starting a business, was the quote is, hurry ruins saints as well as sailors. So that concept of just like rushing, like it's going to like it's going to eat you alive as an artist, as a designer, or whatever, as a business owner. And so really like taking that to heart of like, if you're rushing, like, or you're just constantly trying to meet something, like whatever that is, it's taking away the thing that is actually going to get you to a point where you are successful internally, but also, you know, ideally as well externally profitable. Yeah.
I'm like, I could add just a few things. I love, yeah. I think what I'll add is, since you are doing everything by yourself, and we've all been in that, I'm like, Natasha, Danny, we've all been in that position. I'm like, Emily too, probably. Just work on like sectioning out everything. You know, you're not gonna be able to meet your initial expectations. I think that's probably the hardest thing to accept, is that, you know, I want to make 20 this or whatever. And it's like, you're going to really have to section it out or put it in a way, like I'm very like factory minded. So it's like, okay, this, you know, Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to do like all just bodices, going to search all, or like get them all together. And then Wednesday, I'll be taking process photos and focusing on social media. And then you like switch the hat and you're like, Thursday, I will be planning and reaching out. Can I get involved in any markets? Is there any way that I can? So then you can give yourself kind of like a hard deadline and then better plan up to whatever event to share the things that you're making. So it's just like, just take little bits at a time. And the hurry thing is like a huge, that'll be a huge stressor that will not help you in the end. Like time is so, you know, we've learned most from last year. You know, you never know what's going to happen, and just because you wanted, time is not real. Absolutely. Time is a social construct. But really, you know, take your time and really pour your intention and your love into the things that you're doing, because, you know, maybe you saw something really, really quickly, and then later on you look back and you're like, oh, and, you know, and then that is when you start to crumble a little bit inside and be like, is it actually worth, like, because I actually just rushed through it. It wasn't the quality that I actually wanted to give. Yeah, just good time and chunk it out. It'll be great, whatever you do.
That's great advice. We've got time for one more question, and this one we're going to talk a little bit about social media and influencers. We've talked about how some of these concepts can like perpetuate the fast fashion model, but just wondering if any of you have any positive experiences working with social media or with influencers in a way that's not like pushing that fast fashion mindset.
I'm like, I'll go. I think that this is something that's been on my docket of like wanting to pair with someone. If there's anyone out there listening now, watching now. But I think that, you know, I don't want to put an umbrella over influencers, but it's like there is sometimes this negative connotation of being attached to fast fashion. And there are definitely some influencers out there. It's like just finding your people. There's influencers out there that are definitely in this slow fashion world. They're definitely in this intentional space. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just finding your people and knowing that those people align with the message, you know, that you guys have core values. Like that's what it's really about, partnering and like collaborating with at the end of the day.
Yeah. When I started out, I kind of figured that was like the way that I needed to approach things and like get the word out about what I was doing. And so I did like create, I think it was 4 hats for 4 different influencers. And for me, the experience was really positive because I did do the work in really figuring out who was like the right fit to represent my brand. But I, of course, I didn't have any money. I wasn't going to be able to pay anyone. So I asked these influencers if they were interested in a hat that I made, and these ones were all interested. But there's always the underlying understanding that, like, because I'm not paying them, they don't have to post about it. They don't have to wear it. So there is a risk with that. But it's, the way I thought about it at the time was, it was like a marketing thing. Like, this is my marketing campaign to start my business. And it worked out really well for me. And like, I'm so lucky that one of them that I gave it to was Jasmine, that curly top. And she has this hashtag rewear that. And so she's been re-wearing the hat I gifted her over the past year, which has been like, I couldn't have asked for a better experience, but I can't say that will always happen. And so that was really cool. But I have kind of made a decision myself that I don't want to continue that, because I want, I don't want to, like, kind of like what you were saying and stating the question, Emily, is that like, I don't want to perpetuate this idea of just like, getting new stuff all the time. And I hope that the people who purchase things from me are seeing it as like an investment piece and something really special that they'll have a long time. And to just kind of gift that to someone, like, there is something to be said about like, when you spend money on something, when you spend what to you is a significant amount of money on something, you are going to make an effort to appreciate that item and rewear it. And when you see it in the closet, you're like, I'm going to rewear that. But if you got it for free, you might not feel that way. So, I mean, I'm not saying I would never give something away again, because, I'm running a business, and it is a good marketing technique in many ways. So for me, it was a good experience, but I get DMs constantly from people asking for free stuff, and I have to explain a little bit about what I do. And, I have a bit of a canned response because it gets exhausting to answer all those. But hopefully people understand, given the way that I answer, about how my, like, by giving something away, that means like, it's just not worth. If I were to do that like monthly or weekly or something, I would have to pad the price. I would have to pad it into the price of my garment, so everyone else would be paying for it. So that's not how I want to approach things.
Yeah, I think I completely also agree with, sometimes it's really hard to gift things that are just one of one. I'm like, yeah, okay,
Exactly.
you're gonna gift something that's one of one, and then people are gonna want that same exact
one,
because that's just the way that social media, and I think influencers, that's like the business structure. It's like, I'm wearing this thing so that you will want this same exact thing. They don't want a different one. They just want the same exact one. And unfortunately, with vintage and rework, that's like sometimes not really possible in the scale, to a point where it really is going to be beneficial as a business for your time. So that I think it depends on what you're obviously, selling, and if you're partnering with an influencer. But I think from our perspectives on the panel, I think we equally, like, it's very, very difficult to gift something and really see the benefit. And honestly, I think instead, I've noticed from like any type of maybe gifted item versus maybe instead doing a collaboration or doing something else has gotten way more visibility and traction than someone wearing something that you might think, because of the numbers and the reach. It just sometimes I wouldn't go based off of numbers. Sometimes you're really trying to get the right audience, and that's really should be the way to collaborate with someone or a brand. So it doesn't always have to be a person, a brand, like another shop, like to like collaborate and do a collection. That's like, you know, if you're looking to get your brand out there, that's one of the best ways to do that. And creatively, you get to create something really special. And it shows like the kind of camaraderie between business to business, which I think we need more of. Like, I think especially vintage particularly, I always felt when I joined it, it was so competitive and so like cutthroat sometimes. And I just knew that when I started, I was like, I just absolutely do not, if I ever get there, like I just need to stop doing what I'm doing, because it's definitely, I feel like it hurts, I think, the industry, and it hurts kind of the community that I think we need to kind of grow.
Thank you all so much. I'm just going to kind of close off with kind of reiterating that like this is all about community, and you all have made us feel like so welcome, and like we can ask questions, and I just feel like this group here is so aligned on their vision of sustainability, and has just done so much to encourage us as No New Clothes participants or entrepreneurs or just people who love fashion. So thank you all so much. I have put the Instagram handles for all of our incredible panelists in the chat. Would love for you to go follow them. I'm also right now putting in the chat the No New Clothes pledge. Please follow along, remake our world. Please take the No New Clothes pledge. And we want to hear about your journeys. Like, we want to hear about what reflections this pledge have brought forward for you, what makes you excited about it. Like, show off those fun rewear moments. Like, we all are here because we want to see that. And yeah, just thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you for joining, everyone, and thank you for hosting, Emily.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Take care, all. Bye-bye.